Hello and welcome. Let's try these. I can see the time. Okay. Not wanting to be a cat bore. This isn't a channel about cats and kittens, but they're a very good comparison to our kilesas, especially the kittens that are very young and, as you see, occasionally interrupt this little talk we have, demanding attention, much as our defilements, we call the kilesas, the Pali word for defilements, of greed, hatred and delusion, come along and interrupt our meditation practice sometimes. Sometimes more often, sometimes less so. These are our root defilements that in varying degrees create all of the obstacles highlighted in the 5 hindrances to meditation of desire, ill will, restlessness or worry, tiredness, and doubt. The kilesas need training. We can't, like the kittens, we can't eradicate them just like that. But with time, they can be trained. If you give in to their demands, however, it is adding fuel to the fire. Now, just before starting this talk, the medium-aged kitten, not quite so young, whom is very demanding, I do succumb to feeding them. I can't help it. And because of your support, we're able to get some proper cat food from a local supplier. And it's a way I can practice loving kindness, compassion, but get great joy, and this is leading me on to my first comment, get great joy from doing that, seeing how happy they are to see me and how happy they are to receive food. But if we just feed them, like if we just feed our kilesas whenever they pop up, then they're no longer trained. We just add fuel to the fire and create more demand. So I had to be very disciplined before making this talk and say, no, don't feed it. As much as she was jumping up and down my legs and looking all cute with her big eyes at me and making her meowing noises, I said, no, because she's already eaten. And at the risk of her now interrupting the flow, which is fine, but she's got the message, she's in training. But the much younger one, whom isn't so trained, when she gets wind of me sitting here, as she's come to know there might be food, I think they communicate in this area, she'll be less easy to calm. The older kitten, or the older cat that's here, she knows exactly the times she gets food, sunrise and sunset, and ignores me, other than to be affectionate or just say hello, come and keep me company, or to come here and rest. She ignores me for the rest of the time. And this is how we train our kilesas, in the same way. We don't give in to their demands. The first comment asks, how do you incorporate joy and playfulness into your practice? And then you go on to say, I feel that the popularity of someone like Ajahn Brahm lies partly in his ability to include this in his teachings. So, yes, Ajahn Brahm's talks and teachings, of which I've been listening to for many years. In fact, I think he was the first monk I probably ever listened to because of that popularity. Yes, popular. And that is a wonderful way that the Dharma is being spread. With regards to how do you incorporate joy and playfulness into your practice, I don't think I go about actively trying to incorporate joy or playfulness into my practice. Do I seem lacking in joy, or joyless? I'm actually very much filled with joy, I think, most of the time. That is the feeling I have. If that doesn't come across, and I seem a little bit austere, miserable, unjoyful, joyless, then that's not the way I feel. As for playfulness, well, play means, apart from playing games or sport or games, engaged in competition, which monks do not incorporate into their practice because of its unnecessary nature. The meaning of play is something being done for no particular purpose other than for sheer enjoyment. Everything I'm doing is for no particular purpose other than for sheer enjoyment, to become free from suffering. So my entire practice is play. Even going on Pindapata in the morning on alms round, it's a long walk and takes quite a long time, but it's very enjoyable. It is play because it isn't just for the purpose of receiving food. I've usually received enough food for my daily needs within the first few hundred yards of that walk. I could turn around and return, have my meal and be finished. But I continue for the same walk that I have done for over a year now because it is enjoyable. Joy. I'm incorporating joy into my practice, as well as giving the opportunity for others to experience joy through the generosity they're able to practice. Giving dana. Giving is a joyful experience, as we all experience on occasions such as festivals, birthdays, Christmas, or whatever, when we give gifts for the sake of giving. And everything about this practice, whether you are Ajahn Brahm or whether you are a novice monk in an unheard of monastery anywhere in the world, is about letting the body relax slowly and become settled, and the mind to settle and become calm and peaceful and tranquil, all for the sake of joy. Now, some playfulness comes into our day-to-day activities. For example, with regards to the kittens, the cats, the dog, anything we come across in our path that requires attention, consideration. And for their sake, rather than our own, we would play. Now, of course, it is enjoyable to play with the little kittens or play with the little dogs or whatever, for both the dog or the kitten and the person playing. But this is as far as play goes. If you really look at what you're doing, even if you're playing sports and games, it is for the sake of joy and joyfulness. So how do I incorporate it? It is a natural part of living this life. Refraining from that which is only momentary pleasure, momentary gratification that leads to ongoing and continued suffering. So when you give in to those demands of the kilesas, continually having to drink something when you're not really thirsty. I know one has to rehydrate, but I notice even in some Dharma talks that I've seen, I hear or I see people continually drinking. And I think, well, the time of this Dharma talk is 40 minutes, 50 minutes, an hour. I think our bodies are able to go for 40 minutes, 50 minutes or an hour without having to rehydrate. But there's this craving, this thirst, not through lack of hydration or dehydration, but wanting to do something, to stimulate something, to entertain something. And the more you give in to those demands, the more you need to keep satiating the unsatiable. This is the teachings of Buddhism. Understanding the cause of suffering, desire, and seeing what is needed rather than what is wanted, and just dealing with what is needed. So drink the fluids that are necessary, sit down, listen to Dharma, or talk about Dharma. There's no need to refuel during that time. That's just an example. But how often do you get up and go to the fridge? How often do you have to flicker through your devices to find something else to read, listen to, look at, to stimulate the senses, as opposed to just sitting and appreciating nothingness that is going on? In fact, there's always something going on around you. Unless you become deeply absorbed into jhana, secluded from the hindrances, secluded from sensory perception, sense consciousness, and the feelings of the body, then there is always something going on. Even in solitary confinement, in a sensory deprivation chamber, something of this nature, where there's nothing to see, hear, smell, taste, or feel, as much as that is possible, the mind will still continue. The kilesas are still there. Those kittens up there are boinging and boinging and boinging around. Meow, meow, give me food, give me love, play with me. It's going on and on and on. Now, if the older kitten, who's more educated, the older cat is more educated, wants my attention, she only knows she has to go to my sangati, which is our upper robe, that we rarely ever, if ever, need to replace, because we only use it really for ceremonial occasions. But it's always folded neatly in the same place. She just needs to go up to that with her spiky fingernails, or whatever you'd call them, claws, and grab at it just playfully. She's just playing, because she knows that immediately gets my attention. I hear it. The alarm bells ring. Ah, no, if she rips that, it's a problem. I have to repair it very quickly. It's something we need to look after and take care of. That's the greatest way she's learned to attract my attention. So she's educated herself. Now, these kilesas, our defilements, are also as cunning and clever as that, finding little loopholes and ways in the back door to get in to disturb your practice and draw you outside of that into some other area. To, for instance, play. Go and maybe play, I don't know what they're called these days, but I was familiar with like patience with the cards, but on your computer when I had such at work. You know, it was very entertaining to go into something like that rather than be working and play cards all day, which was a seemingly objectiveless activity and could be considered as just play, but also very much addictive by its very nature. So we're not worried about playfulness or cautious about play, and it is already part of our practice, but it is to be considered and understood for what it is. That it could be stimulation of the kilesas that is unnecessary, which is why we stay away from, say, board games, I don't know, Cluedo, Monopoly, Snakes and Ladders, whatever you like, why we don't play football or volleyball or table tennis. This is competitive sport that is away from the idea of what the Buddha teaches us and how we practice. To develop joy and playfulness, this feeling, we have words for it, piti and sukha. Physical rapture, and so that's the joy, the physical happiness, contentment, pleasing feeling of the body, piti, and sukha, the mental emotion of happiness, contentment, and joy of the brain, the mind. Piti and sukha. This is playfulness and joy. And I think it's that Ajahn Brahm elaborates on in his very wonderful talks, and what draws in a lot of attention. I get a lot of joy also through doing this interaction, what I'm doing now, reading your comments and being able to reply, and know that those replies are heard because I see the responses. So this is part of my practice. I'm developing my own understanding by this activity, but in a very joyful and it's informal, playful way. Does mindfulness and concentration lead to the other parts of the Eightfold Path? Like, does it make keeping precepts easier? Yes, I think I've discussed this in some detail recently, but the Noble Eightfold Path one shouldn't take either in a progressive order, step by step, or consider that you should only work on one aspect. Just to quickly remind those who don't know, and with frequently asked questions, be patient. I know they're frequently asked, but we must continue to remind ourselves of those answers, and hopefully as I answer them more and more often, my answers get more condensed, practiced, and to the point, so therefore more quick and don't take up much time. But it's kind to always reply to those frequently asked questions when they come up as best I can, rather than just refer them to an old video, which is hard to do because you're never quite sure where the question last came up, or I'm not. So anyway, the Noble Eightfold Path, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, usually in that order, is divided into three categories of sila, moral virtue, samadhi, meditation, and panya, wisdom. And all three of those categories, which includes all 8 sections of the Noble Eightfold Path, are required to be practiced in order to progress towards enlightenment, liberation, freedom from suffering within this lifetime. That is the practice, that is the Noble Eightfold Path. Mindfulness and concentration will help you, mindfulness especially, help you see the errors of your ways, in that you are more careful about everything you do, your actions of body, speech and mind during all of your daily activities. This is mindfulness. Samadhi, concentration, helps you develop that ability to have mindfulness during those activities by developing the powers of the mind's concentration, focusing on one meditation object until the mind becomes absorbed into that object, free, secluded from external distractions or internal mental distractions or hindrances, we call them. This power of concentration goes to support mindfulness, as does mindfulness go to support concentration. But they're all based and only achievable on a foundation of good sila, that is moral virtue, keeping the 5 precepts. So you can't just practice mindfulness and concentration and expect that to keep the precepts for you, because we're not keeping precepts by doing something, we're refraining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, or taking of intoxicants. Refraining from. So we're not doing those things. So yes, mindfulness will help you see when you might approach doing one of those things, breaking one of those precepts, and then be able to reverse, retract, not break one of those precepts in that way. But by refraining from breaking those precepts, you have a better foundation for sitting in formal meditation, developing samadhi uninterrupted by hindrances, the main one being in that sense restlessness and worry, the thoughts of the past giving you concern, worrying about the past. I can always say, just leave the past where it is, you can't change it. But if you've broken precepts, it will come back to haunt you continually, over and over again. So as much as you bring your concentration, your awareness, your consciousness into the present moment here and now, if you've broken precepts, the past will always bug you a little bit. It will always bother you and prevent you from attaining deep states of absorbed meditation. So as you can see, all of these 8 parts interlace and support each other. So the Noble Eightfold Path is holistic. We practice it all. Sila, Samadhi, Panya, all of it together. Moral virtue, meditation, and wisdom. Can I go on Arms Round with you? Oh, I think I've replied to that. I didn't mean to read it out. Anyone is very welcome to come on Arms Round with me. I could really do with a help, actually. You can carry stuff and you will be fed at the end of it. So I'm not sure where you were writing to me from, but if you're local, please join in. Yes. Okay, I have a question. As far as I understand, karma means action and is all about causes. When we create bad karma or good karma. Okay, my question is there a beginning to the universe and is there a first act of karma? And was it a good act or a bad act? And so on. Was the universe created and was that creator good or bad? And it goes on. This would be considered a frequently asked question, and the Buddha himself would not answer this question. As he said, it cannot be determined, the beginning of karma, as can the beginning of everything. Not only the beginning of the universe, but in cosmology, the beginning of previous world systems, universes, cannot be determined. It's like saying, when did time start? Now, whether the Buddha knew this or not, he gave this great teaching of what he taught. This was to his bhikkhus in the forest. He asked, how many leaves are in this forest? As compared to how many leaves are in the palm of my hand. So he picked up some leaves. Are the leaves in the palm of my hand as great as the number of leaves in the forest? And the bhikkhus replied, of course, Buddha, no, the leaves in the forest are far greater. And the Buddha explained that all he's teaching is this handful of leaves. This is enough for liberation within this lifetime. Also, on the principle that it cannot be proven, the beginnings of the universe, or estimated its end, even within this world system, although some scientific evidence may be there, and some scientific calculations can predict, do we really need to know it? We weren't around necessarily. We might have been in a previous, we would have been in a previous rebirth, but if we can't remember that, what's going on within this lifetime, within this realm, is what we should be concentrating on practicing now. So it is one of those frequently asked questions that the Buddha called the Achintaya, in the Achintaya Sutta, the 4 things. The origins of the universe, he does never answer this question. The exact way karma works, in that why is it that someone can do lots of bad things but still have some good luck, or do lots of good things and still have some bad luck? That is something that he doesn't also explain, because it can be attributed to many previous lifetimes, the bad luck, bad karma that you may have created, causes and conditions by those actions. The powers of the Buddha and the particular states of jhana, mainly referring to arupa as opposed to rupa jhana, but the arupa jhanas, the formless states of absorption, are not to be questioned or discussed because they are to be only experienced by the wise, were his words, as opposed to believed, as which they would have to be, having no documentary evidence to back anything up of that nature. Okay, what would be the exact first thing to do when I open my eyes and wake up every day? And what routine do you recommend after I just wake up and before go to work? That's excellent question. As soon as you wake, even if you don't quite open your eyes in the morning, that is the best time to establish mindfulness in front of you. Now, when I say in front of you, I don't mean literally. I mean as the most foremost thing in your mind for the day ahead. Mindfulness. And the best way to do that, and it takes some training, but as soon as you wake, not to do anything, not to move until you observe that first breath in and out. And then consequently and eventually at the very end of the day, try and establish the practice that the very last thing you're aware of is that breath in and that breath out before you go to sleep. In my practice, from my experience, and generally in Theravada Buddhism, as far as we're concerned, when you are asleep, you cannot have mindfulness. You're asleep. That's it. Whatever goes on, dreams, we don't deal in that. This is phenomena created by the mind through its activities during the night. But if you're practicing well, you'll have less and less and few and eventually no dreams to be concerned with anyway. So you'll go to sleep on the last breath, and when you wake up, as you open your eyes or before you open your eyes, the first thing you do is observe the breath. Then if you can, before you do anything else, get out of your bed, sit on the floor and meditate. Set your alarm half an hour earlier and meditate for half an hour or 20 minutes. Then get up and do whatever you normally do. If you're able to, then join me at 6 a.m. Sri Lanka time, or whatever time you watch it's recorded, so you can watch it at any time during the day, even if it's the previous days. Morning chanting, short meditation and blessings. Have your cup of coffee and go off to work. What was the rest of the question? And what do you recommend after you just wake up and before you go to work? So that's it. So just as you wake up, establish mindfulness, and then before you do anything else, meditate for a short while, even if it's only 15 minutes, but try and make it an hour if you can. Everybody can get up an hour earlier for meditation. And then go about your daily activities before going to work, but maintain that mindfulness, which will be strengthened and supported by the meditation you've practiced also in the morning. So the mindfulness will support the samadhi. Sama sati, right mindfulness, supports sama samadhi. And the sama samadhi, right meditation, supports sama sati, right mindfulness. So it all starts your day in the very best possible way. Before you do anything, before you clean your teeth, before you make a cup of coffee, unless you really have to, if you're thirsty, you need some water or something. The problem with that is you'll get engaged with other things. The very last thing you should do is turn your phone on. Now I know it's on because the alarms come on, but have all your notifications at night switched off or to silent. You should have them like that anyway, all of the time really, if it's possible in your life. But don't look at that phone until you have to. That is the work day beginning, or the play day beginning, but that is not the Dharma. Unless it's to join me for live chanting meditations and blessings, in which case I guess you have to put your phone on for that. But I managed to do that and produce it and put it on YouTube and live without seeing any notifications, reading any news or doing any of that stuff, because I have my phone set up to only do that one thing. That's all I use it for. So, and some Dharma talks that I listen to, which are getting fewer and fewer, because I'm finding that the Dharma talks and channels that I'm listening to seem to be digressing more and more into other areas not relevant to the practice itself, which has brought me nicely back to my core very few teachers that I do listen to. Not necessarily within my own lineage, but whom are practicing similarly to me, even not necessarily the same kind of meditation, but certainly have the same understanding or a compatible understanding of the suttas and the Dharma that I've come to understand. So, there we go. See, I'm having so much joy in enjoying this so much now. I don't know how long I've been talking for. So I brought these along today, look, I remember the time, but I can't work that out. I think I've only been talking for half an hour, but we'll see. What is your view on the annihilation aspect of nirvana versus the enabling enlightenment aspect? It seems that people focus on being crave less instead of bringing forth pleasantness. That would become intense when filling a void. Instead of bringing forth pleasantness that will become intense when filling a void. Well, I think I've just really spoken about that as far as my practice is concerned. This is certainly not about the, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that word right, annihilation aspect of, you say nirvana, we say nibbana in Pali. I only make that not to quibble over the Sanskrit word and the Pali word, but they have slightly different meanings too. And nibbana is what I'm talking about. Nirvana might have some other contexts and meanings in not only Buddhism but other religions. So not knowing the background you're coming from exactly, I stress I'm talking about nibbana, which is free, which is what I've discussed in recent talks at some length, not by any sense a nihilistic. We're not looking to eradicate all and everything because it's unsatisfactory, but to understand it and not be tied to it, subjected to it, or involved with it, attached. Letting go of our desires, letting go of what we don't like, our aversions, in order to be free from the suffering that that's causing. That isn't a nihilistic or annihilation in itself. So versus enabling enlightenment aspect and this, I don't really understand that's what enlightenment is in my understanding. And it's full of pleasant feelings and joy that to some extent do fill the void, but not in a sense that they're central feelings of piti and sukha is not so much central gratification as one might get from something that feels really nice, tastes nice, smells nice, or looks nice. A more overall aspect of contentment, the joy and feeling that comes from not needing anything for sensory stimulation. Not annihilation, not numbness, not anesthetic, but being satisfied, content, sufficiently to allow the body to have its natural piti and sukha, physical rapture, mental joy. Could you please recommend a really good book for the new beginner to read? I'm in the United States. It needs to be English, please. Thank you. So I think I should write this book because there really isn't one. There's millions of books on Buddhism and they all come from different perspectives and commentaries. The best, and what I always recommend, is the chanting book because it sums up beautifully. You don't have to be into chanting or anything, or poetry or anything like that, but it sums up beautifully the reflections and teachings of Buddhism. So that I've mentioned many times, and if you haven't got the link to the chanting book that I usually recommend, then hopefully you can find it. I won't explain it all again. It's there throughout the comments and in all these videos, but email me or something. But the Dhammapada, you must have heard of. The Dhammapada is the common place to start, which is a collection of verses. It's somewhat like poetry, but short stanzas or verses that cover all aspects of Buddhism, but actually come from their extracts, little snippets or trailers of the full suttas. So rather than really getting into the challenging reading of the Sutta Pitaka, which is a collection of many books, I would begin with what's called the Dhammapada. And that will give you an overall perspective of the idea of Buddhism and its teachings. The chanting book gives you the specific teachings in a summarized form and some useful reflections, even as far as how to meditate in the Anapanasati Sutta and how to understand dependent origination in the Pachiti Samuppada. These are from the simplest to the most complex ends of the Buddhist philosophy, all contained in the chanting book. But then for a more progressive understanding of the Dharma and further reading, one usually then goes into this reading the suttas and would begin with the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length discourses. But those are very long, albeit they're very repetitive, so you can read through them relatively quickly. If you are used to reading that kind of material, you can get the rhythm of it and know that what's just been said is going to be said 3 or 4 more times before anything new is said. And you can skip a little bit through and play around with it. You don't have to start at the beginning or at the end. You can just open a page at random. If you're reading the suttas, you're going to be listening to the words of the Buddha, the Dharma. Like these videos, watch these, pick any of them. Just listen to them, subscribe from here on after. Again, we're talking about the basics of Buddhism and also the finer intricacies of the more advanced stages of jhana and nibbana, and as far as Buddhism really goes, without even delving into such like the Abhidharma, which is the long and drawn out in-depth analysis of the Buddha's teachings and forms the third part of the Tipitaka, the third basket of the overall Pali Canon, the Buddhist scriptures that I'm always referring to here. I've read through that, I've been taught that, I've been on courses with that, the Abhidharma, that is, the higher Dharma, but I don't practice it, I'm not interested in it. Again, it's additional complication. The simplest form of teachings and the best to get going with is the Dhammapada. And if I get round to it, I might just write a short little pamphlet that explains the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, and then further lists like the 5 khandhas, and the 5 hindrances, and then going right to the 12 links of dependent origination. Might be a useful little pamphlet for someone to be able to just pick up somewhere. But all of these things, if you hear them mentioned and you Google them and you look at the Wikipedia, I only say that because it's the only constant, if you use one constant source, you can generally trust it, and everything else that comes up could be coming from anywhere. But I found that consistently Wikipedia has a good explanation of all of these commonly used ideas and lists. So for instance, you Google Four Noble Truths, go to the Wikipedia entry, it's very well explained, as is from there on a link to the Noble Eightfold Path, and so on and so forth. I know it's nice to have a little book to hold, to pick up, to buy, but until someone produces one of those and puts it in the hands of Penguin, then it would have to be paid for and charged, you see, that kind of a book in a bookshop. And the problem is we do not ever charge for Dharma as monks. And whenever it gets commercially orientated, it then isn't necessarily coming from monks. Most monasteries, however, have free Dharma books. You can go to forestsangha.org to get many, many free books online. They used to post them out, but I don't know whether that's still done, and especially not sure that that's done internationally these days. But actual books to have in your hand, if you can pick up a chanting book in your own language, it's a very good source of information where everything is covered. If you get a Pali and English or Pali and your language Theravada chanting book, there's everything you need to know in there. The precepts, all the different forms of taking refuge and the levels of precepts, 5 precepts, 8 precepts, 10 precepts, all you need to know. So maybe that will help. But I'm sorry, I can't recommend other than that a specific book. A summary of the Buddha's teachings and the Sutta Pitaka, but it's quite hard work as a beginner's guide. It's not really a beginner's guide or a handbook to Buddhism or what is Buddhism book. I think there might be a dummy's guide to Buddhism out there, I don't know, but how authentic that is, I have no idea. It's a commercial venture, so possibly it isn't very authentic or very accurate necessarily, I don't know. But yeah, so that's about all I can say there. Oh yes, I was going to say, so the Word of the Buddha is the other one by Bhante. Is it Nyanamoli or Nyanatiloka? I get the two mixed up. The Word of the Buddha, either by Bhante Nyanatiloka or Nyanamoli, is where people usually begin reading the sutras, because it's a concise summary of them all. And what it says, the Word of the Buddha. Any tips for allowing the breath to be as it is rather than forcing it to be lighter or stronger? I find that when I really focus on the breath, I tend to control. So you've answered your own question. Any tips on allowing the breath to be as it is rather than forcing it to be lighter or stronger? That, allowing it to be as it is, rather than forcing it to be lighter or stronger. Because you find, you say this, not me, you find that when you really focus on it, you tend to control. So don't really focus on it, just know it. Sit and know you're breathing in and you're breathing out. Reread the Anapanasati Sutta. The Buddha tells us how to do it. You don't have to read the full sutta, read it in the chanting book, the Anapanasati Sutta chanting, knowing that the breath, the whole body of the breath is long, knowing that the breath is short, knowing it's deep, knowing it's shallow, knowing the qualities of the whole body of air as you breathe in, as you breathe out. I mean, the Anapanasati Sutta says it all. It says, establish mindfulness in front of you, as I began our talk today with what you do in the morning when you wake up. And then just sit and observe the breath. And then you'll naturally, with practice, fall into knowing it rather than trying to control it. I'm not sure where you come from, but I know a lot of people, not that that's relevant, but I know a lot of people in some places, because of the background and training, think they really need to be screwing their faces up, concentrating like this. Now, samadhi is not that. It's just sitting and allowing the body to relax, and then ultimately the mind will, eventually the mind will slowly settle and become calm and peaceful too. And during this process, as you're breathing in, as you're breathing out, your breath will naturally slow down as you relax, and just observe this. If you want to have a little bit of a key into the breath, notice as you're breathing in that you can feel it's cool or it's warm, and as you breathe out, it is not so noticeable. The temperature has reached the temperature of your body. But, I mean, the Buddha doesn't mention that, so what the Buddha says, just observe the breath. Is it long? Is it short? Is it deep? Is it shallow? Is it fast? Is it slow? The qualities of the breath that are easy to see, easy to detect. You don't even need to focus at the tip of your nose, if that's what you're trying to do, as is often taught, as is often explained. The Buddha never said that in the Anapanasati Sutta either, but addresses the situation of knowing this process of breathing, after all, which is something we're doing continuously, all of the time, without break during our day. And the only time we should not be mindful of the breath is when we're asleep, because we cannot have mindfulness when we're asleep. But as soon as you wake up, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out. And every opportunity throughout the day thereafter, bringing your awareness, your mindfulness to the breath. This is practicing right mindfulness, or developing samasati by using the meditation object of the breath throughout all of your daily activities, and therefore enabling you to very easily observe it in samadhi without trying to control it or finding it difficult in any way. Okay. How does the 9th stage, grasping, lead to the 10th stage, becoming, please? This is, right, sorry, I missed a bit of the question. In dependent origination, how does the 9th stage, grasping, lead to the 10th stage, becoming? So, I've forgotten the Pali word, the ninth stage. It doesn't matter really, does it? You've said it in English and I'm speaking in English. So it's actually more attachment, the ninth stage. For instance, you get a certain sense of gratification from grasping. So say you were becoming attached to your uniform, whatever that may be. It will give you a sense of becoming what that uniform represents. So say I became attached to my robes, it might be because it gives me a sense of becoming a monk. These are leading to rebirth, ultimately in the 12th step, so I've skipped a step there, not remembering the 11th, into rebirth, actually rebirth into existence, this cycle of existence, beginning with ignorance at the beginning, number one. Well, I'm not going to go into the whole teachings of the Paccittiya Samuppada here, the 12 links of dependent origination, because apparently I've already done that. If you're saying thank you for that, you're just not clear on how the grasping leads to becoming. By becoming attached to something, or by being attached to something, it becomes you. You are that. For instance, personality view, ego. I am this, I am that. I'm good at this, I'm bad at this. I'm better than them at this, or I'm worse than them at this. This form of conceit, one can be attached to, grasp to, the opposite of which is letting go of, which stops you becoming it. So to abandon Sakkaya Ditthi, personality view, we have to let go of believing that these 5 khandhas are what we are. We are just those 5 khandhas. That is not what we are. They're always changing. The causes and conditions that are put in place are going to bear fruits and results represented in those 5 khandhas, but are no more permanent than anything else. They're anicca, impermanent, and cause unsatisfaction as suffering, and are anatta, not self, are out of our control. This understanding allows us to let go. So by that letting go, we will not become that. We will not develop, and the sense of becoming, I've forgotten what the Pali word was now. It's not a hunkara mamankara, that's me making my making, but that's similar. Anyway, if you look in the chanting book at the Paccittiya Samuppada Sutta, it's beautifully described both in the Pali language and in English, and each step leads to the next. And it's a logical progression that from grasping something necessarily, or gripping, holding on tightly to something, you will become it. So if you grasp onto the view that you think you are not very good at something, you will become not very good at something. That doesn't mean that by grasping the view that you're good at something, you will become good at something, but because it is wrong view in that becoming good at something is not a tangible thing in essence in itself, but a misunderstanding, avijja, ignorance, that all you're achieving is something other than what is knowing what is going on, what is observing that, which is not leading to rebirth, but being conditioned. What I was talking about earlier. I think I've gone a little bit too much into, it's very difficult to take 2 pieces of the 12 links of dependent origination out of the 12 links of dependent origination and discuss them effectively, I think. So again, treat it as a whole, holistically, from beginning to end, and you'll see where it leads. But more importantly, when you're sitting in meditation, if your mind has wandered and you're not in samadhi, you're not in jhana, then you have the ideal opportunity to see how grasping to something, like someone was saying earlier, grasping to controlling the breath makes them become that, unable to stop controlling the breath. You'll see that for yourself. This is largely a part of the practice, observational aspect of seeing within ourselves all that's going on in both this physical body and this thinking brain. Where in the writings does it say not to expect much from people? Well, I don't think it does. I think it generally, the overall, because I said don't have expectations of people. That wasn't a quote from the suttas. I think the overall taste, sense, idea of the teachings of the Buddha are to lower one's expectations of anything. To understand suffering, understand the cause of suffering, and therefore see the end of suffering through following the path leading to the end of suffering. That is not having great expectations of either yourself or of others. So it's a general idea, not a specific quote from the suttas that I might have mentioned there, I think. But again, try it. If you expect everything to be done by someone, next time you go to a restaurant, or next time you stay in a hotel, or even next time when you step on the bus, say to yourself, I'm not expecting that this bus journey, the driver and the man collecting, they probably don't have them anymore, bus conductors, I don't know, are going to be very good at their job, but at least they're going to give me a ticket and they're going to get me from A to B. That's good enough. But if you expect the journey to be absolutely wonderful, you're going to be disappointed. See this, try it for yourself, experience it, and then you'll understand. You'll also understand the suttas and see why it's not necessary for that to be mentioned specifically in a particular sutta, or for me to quote a sutta number to that effect, because that isn't the practice. That is just a literary exploit. The practice is seeing all of this stuff in reality and making it beneficial to and conducive to your own practice, heading towards contentment, being satisfied with little, easily pleased, and being able to sense and experience joy, the fullness of joy through very little, and progress in your practice, progress towards Nibbana, following within the parameters of the Noble Eightfold Path. This is the practice, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. So on that note, I think I shall end it there, and if there's something useful, I hope there is something you can use and put it into practice, experience it, try it out, share it with others. If not, let it go. Don't worry about it. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.